When we talk about CTE, we usually talk about the NFL, and obviously they just settled a lawsuit where Roger Goodell and the NFL basically got off clean. But that's not necessarily the case in a New York Times article that focuses on a young man who goes by the name of Patrick Grange. So there are researchers at Boston University and Virginia Boston Healthcare System who diagnosed Patrick Grange's brain. He was a soccer player who had great aspirations of being a player in Major League Soccer here in the States. Now, I have had some suspicions about this, and I know that probably many of you have as well. And that suspicion goes into, we understand that football players, NFL, not football, but football players have a great potential for having CTE. Boxers also have it by taking so many punches to their head. NHL players are starting to have it. The first Major League Baseball player was diagnosed with it just a few years ago, Ryan Freel, who played for the Cincinnati Reds and committed suicide. Now the focus is shifting, thankfully, because, again, I've had these thoughts for a while, that soccer players may actually be suffering from CTE. Now, what exactly do we mean? How exactly can this happen? On-field collisions, sure, that's a no-brainer. But what about heading the ball? Now, the story of Patrick Grange is that he started playing soccer at a very young age on those, you know how we all have Nerf hoops when we're younger and we're dunking the ball and whatnot. He had a little soccer goal, and he would head it in, he would head the ball in when he was just 3, 4, 5 years old. And the story goes, not only was he heading the ball at a young age, but he also fell as a toddler a few times. He was knocked unconscious in a high school game. He had 17 stitches in his head after an on-field collision. The doctor was quoted as saying in the New York Times, "We have seen other athletes in their 20s with this level of pathology, but they've usually been football players. We can't say for certain that heading the ball caused his condition in this case, but it is noteworthy that he was a frequent header of the ball and he did develop this disease. I'm not sure we can take it any further than that." One doctor also said the brain doesn't fully develop until you are 25 years old, and he discourages heading the ball. Patrick Grange died April of 2012 of ALS. The average age of diagnosis of ALS is 55 years old, by the way. He was 27. 17 months after being diagnosed, he died. Does this mean that we need to regulate the way that we bring up our youth academy players and youth system players and forbid them from heading the ball until they are, rules now state, depending on the league, 10 to 14 years old? I truly believe, to avoid situations like Patrick Grange, that we should not allow our kids, our teammates, our players, our cousins, what have you, our family members, our friends who are of younger ages to not head the ball until they are junior in high school. It seems ridiculous, but if you do not want your son ending up like Patrick Grange, dying of ALS, not being mobile, suffering from depression, suffering from memory loss, having paralysis, being in a wheelchair at 27 years old. Doesn't really matter what age it is. ALS is a horrible, 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 horrible disease. But 27 years old, it's too young. Continuing on with heading, by the way, he had stage 2 on a 4-point scale. Heading, by the way, according to the New York Times, last year, the journal Radiology published results of a study by Lipton and others of 29 amateur adult soccer players with a median age of 31 years old who had played soccer since childhood. It concluded that, quote, heading is associated with abnormal white matter microstructure and with poor neurocognitive performance. It's sad, it's unfortunate, but if there is a way to prevent all of this, why not take the precautions to do it? We don't want to have more Junior Seaus, more Ryan Freels, more Dave Duersons. We don't want to have it. Let's try to save sports a little bit. Let's try to save it for, I'm not going to even say the youth of America, do it for them. It's not necessarily that. Let's just try to better our lives while we're playing competitive sports. If there are ways to go about not having any of this happen to you, to a family member, to a friend, what have you, why not take those precautions? Why not? Lastly, a rugby player who goes by the name of Barry Taylor competed 19 years, 235 games in Australia. At one point, he had stage 4 C.T.E. At one point, he didn't even know his own name. Into his 50s, it got worse and worse, later dementia, soon thereafter death. Once again, we should try to better ourselves. We should try to better the youth of not just America, but of the youth playing sports. They should not be in wheelchairs at 27 because they're heading the ball at a young age, and they're, the on-field collisions, I get it. It's going to be more prevalent in boxers. But let's take the correct precautions and the correct steps to not have this happen ever again.